What's going on, Guildies? Marcus, your GM here, with the first talent development article post-progression in Warlords of Draenor. What I wanted to talk about today is something that resonates in for Legion and also for what makes us a great guild. Is what we're going to try and do is get everybody to really embrace the encounters. And this segment is about analyzing an encounter. I'm including a video with this talent development post because what I wanted to do with this post was get as much good information out there, and it just became this humongous wall of text. So in this article, what I'm talking about is looking at an encounter and dissecting it into pieces. The first part of the article talks about the different styles of fights that have traditionally been in World of Warcraft, things that you've probably heard in the past or back in the day. Early on in World of Warcraft, the encounters were very simple designs, things like tank and spank and gear checks and survival fights and mechanic checks and DPS races. They were all very simple. And what we noticed in starting around Mists of Pandaria and maybe even towards Wrath is when it kind of started moving in this direction to what we have today is they're all kind of meshed together. And this is important for a couple of reasons. It's important because at every stage of the fight, things are starting to change, or all these little pieces are coming together, and you have to survive this and nuke this all at the same time. It's no longer just a standard, this is a tank and spank. This is patchwork. All you have to do is just stand behind the boss and DPS his butt off. No ads, nothing. We don't see anything like that anymore. So with this article, it's going to show you how to look at what's going on in an encounter and how you as a raider can adapt to it, identify it, and perform better. A good example would be trying to think like an NFL head coach. Everybody knows right now the Seattle Seahawks have an amazing defense. So you're going to have to plan your offense a certain way in order to defeat the Seahawks. The same thing goes with a World of Warcraft encounter. So just in case you don't know what certain styles of fights are, they're all listed here in the article. I won't go through them briefly, but I'll kind of go through what we saw in Hellfire Citadel and Warlords of Draenor as well. For instance, the tank and spank fight would be something similar to the Butcher. It also had kind of a DPS race built in because it had a short enrage timer. Gear checks would be something like Tyrant Bilhari, where if you just didn't have enough gear, you couldn't heal through or DPS through some of the encounters. Survival fights. These are usually the hardest encounters in the game. The first real example would be the Blood Council in Icecrown Citadel, but we saw them in fights like the Lich King and Archimonde. Mechanics checks are usually very basic fights that have very basic things that you have to do outside of your rotation. Good examples would be Fellord Zakuun. You had to know where to put the Seeds of Destruction, and you had to know how to do the pillars. You had to stop what you were doing and do this, and if you didn't do it, it killed you. Another good example, of course, would be Iskar with its chakram and winds and all those different things that you have to do outside of your rotations. DPS races would be things like Tectis, Sokrathar, and Zul'Harak. You had to just blast through certain ads, and it was just a constant race of DPS. With these hybrid encounters, I wanted to talk about probably the most hybrid encounter that we saw in Warlords of Draenor, which was the Blast Furnace. It took us about 50 wipes on Heroic to get past it. This was an important test for the guild and an important test for all guilds. If you couldn't get past Blast Furnace, you probably didn't get to Black Hand. It was very clear. When you look at the Blast Furnace, it's a textbook example of how to look at a fight. The first phase was all mechanics. The second phase was survivability because you had volatile fire and heat and how to activate the primals and things of that nature. And then, of course, the last phase was a glorified DPS race and a survival check because you'd run out of room with the melt mechanic and you had to survive those melt mechanics. It wasn't that hard, but you only had so much time in that last phase. So when we talk about analyzing an encounter, let's start with the one that we know the best, which would be Heroic Archimond. It's the fight we arguably spent the most time on in Hellfire Citadel. Start asking questions to yourself when you're looking at an encounter and you're looking at those boss strats. Start asking questions like, where's the boss positioned, and what are some of the damaging attacks and mechanics, and how do I avoid them? And ask why they're there. Ask why. Why did they put this ad out there? They want me to DPS it. Okay, what do I have to do to DPS it better? The reason why it's important to analyze an encounter is that it enables you to really get the most out of your performance. If you know the mechanics, you'll know when to blow a cooldown. You'll know that, hey, when the Death Caller comes out in Archimond Phase 1, he has to be DPS down a lot. So you're probably going to save some, 1-minute DPS abilities to get through that encounter and to get through that ad, because you have to save things up. You don't want to blow them on something stupid. You don't want to blow a big cooldown right when we're about to transition. You need to identify what we're doing and when we're doing it in order to do your abilities better. So knowing the encounter actually naturally inflates your DPS, because now you'll know, okay, Deathcaller and Doomfire are out. I can start dotting them up. I can start blowing some lower cooldowns, 30 to 1 minute cooldowns on those guys. And when we look at Archimond, it becomes a plethora of all those different styles of fights all in one that change within a matter of seconds of each other. Why do you need to learn how to analyze an encounter? It's simple. It'll affect your performance. There's this story that I always like to tell because it was the first time I was ever in a really hard boss fight as a DPSer. Everybody knows I've tanked for several years. And I'll go ahead and tell the story of, I was playing a survival hunter on Blast Furnace. Actually, it was normal Blast Furnace, and we were in Phase 2. And we were trying to kill the Primal Elementalist, and we were on, I think, the second one, and the Primal was at 3% health, and I unleashed Black Arrow on that target. Black Arrow's one of my highest damaging abilities. It has a 24-second cooldown, and as soon as I put it on him, 2 seconds later he was dead. One of my highest damaging abilities, a long dot. I wasted it on an ad that only had 3% health. And I looked back at that moment because I was watching, my kill video, and I said, man, like, why did I do that? What if that had been a wipe? I could have saved it for the next primal. And that's just a really good example of just kind of really critiquing yourself and really looking at the boss fights and knowing what to do and when to do it. So take a look at this article and really kind of get into enjoying the encounters and learning the encounters. When we get to Legion, we're going to do a little bit more kind of, I guess, open source type of strategy discussion. We're going to post the Fat Boss and Line of Sight, or whoever's doing the strategy guide videos. We're going to post them on the forums, and we're going to lay out kind of, this is a strat we're probably going to be using, and we're going to start talking about it. We're going to start talking about when DPSers should do X and when we should use healing cooldowns, and just really work together as a team to figure these things out. And lastly, I've left some tips about, getting into an encounter and performing under a progression setting. The first tip is just to relax. This isn't like playing Counter-Strike where it requires, millimeters of aim and, fraction of a, microsecond reaction time. You actually do have some time to execute these mechanics and to change what you're doing. Get out of your comfort zone. Do different things in the raid. Don't just be stuck on your rotation. Enjoy the mechanics. Enjoy the fact that you have to run over and do Chakram on Shadowlord Iskar, or run behind the thing, run behind the Siegemaker and Blackhand. Those are all, they were designed like that for a reason, so enjoy it. Have fun with it. Watch those PTR and guide videos. They'll really kind of open your mind up if that's what you like to do, because I know a lot of our raiders really enjoy, knowing what's in there and getting a good battle plan. Any team that doesn't research their opponents is damned to lose. So hopefully you enjoy this article, and we'll be continuing on with talent development as we go forward. So leave your comments or any other suggestions to the article below. Thank you, guys.